I'm Dan Olson, along with my co-host Kenya Landers. We're staying warm here in the southern and the northern part of the U.S. today, but we want to talk JUCO women's basketball, Kenya. Okay.
Yeah.
Why don't you kick it off? We usually start the show with, the power schools and who's done well, and then who's kind of like struggled a little bit. What do you have?
Yeah. So in our rewind segment today, man, we got some teams that are rolling. We got some teams that had some big wins this week, undefeated this week. Shelton State, Utah State, Eastern, Pearl River, Northwest Florida State, and Collin are all undefeated for the week. And as you know, Dan, we're hitting on the grind time. We're hitting on the grind time where we're playing a lot. We're playing a lot, and we're playing often with very little rest. So these teams are doing what they got to do to keep their train rolling, and then they're definitely working hard to stay undefeated. Then we got a couple teams that are struggling. Western Nebraska, they lost two this past week, but as we know, like I said, they play often, and I'm sure they're going to bounce back pretty quick upcoming week.
So we have three teams in the top 25, in the top 20, that are still undefeated.
Yep.
Northwest Florida State, who's remained number one, Collin, who's remained number two, and our friends, the Dragons, they're from Hutchinson, Kansas. They're 15-0, I believe. And they're just keeping it on cruise control, kind of, like not everybody's like talking about Hutch, but that's usually the way it goes, and that's the way they kind of like it.
They sneak up behind you. Yep.
Yeah, and then they got you, So,
yep.
But those are three of the nation's best teams that have perennially, well, except for really Collin, been powerhouses over the long haul. And but our Lady Cards kind of fell on hard times here. We were propping them up last week, and they tripped and fell against Blinn, huh?
Yeah, that's a tough loss. That's definitely not one, obviously, that you plan on. But man, Region 14, it's a grind. I mean, like all of them, like you can't take anybody for granted. You can't overlook anybody. But like I said about Western Nebraska, I'm sure they'll bounce back and get it back rolling.
Yeah. The Blinn team, who has over the past 4 or 5 years really been guard dominant, even though they've got a pretty athletic forward and center inside. But it's really kind of a guard-oriented offense and in a really well-coached team. But they hit 5 threes in that game against Trinity Valley, and Chelsea Singleton hit all 5 threes. Nobody else chimed in, And of course, our girl that we've talked about before, Liddy Mwamba, she was a solid performer for the Valley the other day in that loss. She had 20, I think, and 7. So yeah, we'll get it going, Trinity Valley, and see what happens,
Yeah, I really want to go back and watch that though, because like where do you make the adjustments, right? Like you got one player that's just killing you with threes. Like what's the adjustment? Do we go to face guard? Do we not let her touch the ball? I mean, at some point we got to make adjustments. And I'm very interested to see how those 3-pointers came about, what part of the game they came about. Like, I'm really interested to see that because, like it's a game of chess, right? And so you got to make moves and make adjustments. So I'm really interested to see what happened with that.
So the other team we talked about last week, Temple's kind of making a little bit of a charge. Temple, they beat Grayson. When we talked about that was going to be a huge win. They beat them by 4, 73-69. And then they turn around and they get beat by Cisco. Cisco snuck up on them and beat them by 10, So, like you've always said, you got to come to play every game now,
Hey, what's it called? The 24-hour rule. You got 24 hours to be mad. You got 24 hours to celebrate. After that, you got to let it go.
Move on. They were celebrating a little too much there at Temple,
That's right.
But our girl, Kira Bass, I mean, she was dominant again. She had 16-9 against Grayson. So good outing for Kira Bass. But yeah, you you gotta stay consistent,
Gotta
so
stay consistent.
another team that we've talked about in the past, Dodge City. Dodge is number 14. And again, they're two Paris girls, Santa Catarina and Paris Atkins.
Killing it.
They carried them in a 7-point win over Barton, and they had 32 of their 67 points, So once again, that guard play is huge, and they've kept it rolling, as has Casper. Casper, we talked about last week. They knocked off Western Nebraska. And again, Casper got that systematic approach, 4 or 5 players in double figures. We don't know who it'll be each day,
Right.
but it just happens, and they kind of play that unselfish basketball up there at Casper, so, but, someone that we've kind of like initially talked about, but we really didn't hit a lot upon was Salt Lake from week 1 up until now. But Salt Lake is pretty good. I always said that they were, and they've got a dynamite guard, Heaven Samoya Mathis. She's a transfer from a Division II school in California, and but she's not a Division II player. I can tell you that. I mean, a lot of Division IIs would love to have her, but she's got a little dynamite in their game in the backcourt. Can knock down jump shots, distribute. But they've got balance on their team. They've got front court size. They've got the ability to hit 3. They got drivers, penetrators. They got a little renewed enthusiasm there at Salt Lake. And, they beat Southern Idaho by 10.
I really love her story. I love her story because I remember reading something early on how she went Division II kind of at the last minute. And, it wasn't what she wanted to do. She wanted to have, lots of kids have the dream, the D1 dream.
Yep.
And she's recreating her story. Like she's recreating where she's going to go, what she's going to do. And that is what I love about JUCO. JUCO gives kids chances to recreate their story, to change the whole trajectory of what they're doing, to, to really go back, revamp what you're thinking about, and then you get to change your story. And I'm telling you, she's going to have some good offers at the end of this season. I
agree. I mean, I was dying. I was really impressed with her when I saw her early in October, so she's carrying it on. Now, here's a game that was pretty good, was yesterday. Odessa went over to New Mexico, and we've talked about Odessa, and they're making a statement, right? And but this New Mexico team now, they ain't no joke. They've got some players on New Mexico, and they finally woke up last night and they played them. They beat Odessa 93-76 at home. Huge win for New Mexico, and a good barometer, for Odessa as to where they stand. But I've got a stat line for you on this. Now listen to this stat line. Okay.
I'm ready.
Yeah, Antonio. She's a freshman guard for New Mexico. All right. A dynamite player, great in the open court, and has a green light offensive game to her. Okay. She has 22 points, 10 boards, and 7 assists. Okay. But she did get a triple double. She turned it over 13 times.
Oh no.
Ouch. What's up?
I was not ready for that. I was not ready for that. I thought you were coming with the steals. I thought you were coming with something else.
That's kind of, we gotta check that off of the record book.
It gave me a headache. No.
Yeah.
Oh man. I hope she bounces back from that.
but their big front court player, Panay Davis from Australia, freshman player that is highly sought after at this point. 17 points, 19 boards. Pivotal probably for their success in that game last night, So, but yeah, that was an interesting stat if I'd ever seen one. I had to double check that,
We're not connecting. Something's off. Something's off.
Yeah.
Something's definitely
Slow it down.
off. Yeah.
Slow it down.
Hey, what do we got going on with our Division II teams?
Kind of unchanged. You know, we still
Mhm.
have Johnson County. I think they're 17-0. They're still number one.
Yeah.
And then you've still got uh Iowa Western. They're still at number two. So no real, you know, rocket and rolling there on the Division
Mhm.
two side. But you know, we've had some subtle changes here in the Division one
Yeah.
JUCO side in the poll from the past week. Um, you know, we're gonna have on shortly MJ Baker, the head coach at Eastern Florida State.
Yeah.
Um, and she's really kind of solidified that program down there at Eastern.
Mhm.
But you know, they had a couple of wins this past week in state. They played Santa Fe, did really well against Santa Fe over in Gainesville. And Amelia Hassett, she's a 6'3", turned from a center to a power forward now, sophomore. She's getting a lot of attention on the 4-year side.
Yeah.
Um, you know, 14-7 against Santa Fe, 20-12 against St. Pete in a pretty lopsided victory against St.
Mhm.
Petersburg. So MJ Baker, we're excited to, you know, speak to her here later
Yeah.
on. And
Yeah.
she's gonna make some noise between now and March, come
Absolutely.
Casper, Wyoming time. Yeah. So but our powerhouse Northwest Florida State, they made a statement within the Panhandle the other day, uh, beating up on Chipola, 76-48. Same
And it
cast of
wasn't even
characters.
that close.
No, I mean they just put the hammer
Yeah.
on them, you know,
Yeah.
and as did Gulf Coast, this week's number 3 at 15, 16-1, I think they are, 84-60 over Pensacola. And as we've mentioned before, Izzy Mamadou, a former, by the way, Eastern Florida State player who's now at
Mm.
Gulf Coast, 21-13 against Pensacola, uh, showing why she's one of the nation's elite front court players, you know. So that's kind of a, you know, synopsis of where we've been in the last 7 or so days on JUCO basketball and the kind of the ups and downs. So listen, when we come back, we're going to do our upload of our show for the day, and we'll touch more on women's JUCO basketball right after this.
Intensity fuels these champion student athletes to greatness. Zurich Insurance is proud to be the official provider of student athlete insurance for the National Junior College Athletic Association. Throughout the highs, we cheer along to their screams of victory. Throughout the lows, we support them through their tears of defeat. Zurich Insurance, helping student athletes play the sport they love.
We're back to NJCAA Hot Hoops. That's Kenya Landers. I'm Dan Olson. We're going to talk some upload in JUCO women's basketball for the week. What are we going to see ahead of the game here coming up? We've got some good games, Kenya, coming up here this
Yeah.
next week. You know, no surprise. It's that way every week. But Indian River, who we really haven't talked a lot about, they're down in Fort Pierce, way down in the southeast tip of Florida, but always have some good athletes. And they're playing Eastern Florida State up at Eastern. So MJ Baker's team's going to have some work to do to get that W. But athletes up and down, pressure. It's going to be a good game. So we'll
It's gonna
see
be
how
really
it
good.
works itself out, and then Eastern, like we said, we're going to talk with MJ Baker here pretty soon. They're playing Daytona State too, and Daytona they have the personnel to compete
Yeah,
and really test people in the state, so that should be an interesting game.
yeah.
So, unranked Barton County, who has a
Receiving
nice
votes,
team.
though. Receiving votes.
Yep. They're going to play number 5 Hutch in the always tough, Jayhawk conference. So I believe they're playing them at Hutch coming up. So that'll be a good challenge for Barton to see how they really fare against a really quality opponent that just really executes it down in a half-court game.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then we got some other panhandle play. We got number 11 Pensacola State, who's trying to sneak up on people. They're going to play number 20 Chipola over in Mariana. John Markham's got it going, although he took a stumbling fall against our Northwest Florida State powerhouse.
Who hasn't? Who hasn't?
So that's on the this coming week. And number 2 Colin, steady Eddie, guard play, quality wins,
Yep.
consistency. They're going to get challenged by number 4 McLennan. That is going to be
a
really
great
good
game.
Yeah. At McLennan too. So, you got Sinead Bevley, who we haven't really talked about, but here's an under the radar guard when she was in high school, kind of got under recruited. Okay. When Bill Brock was at McLennan last year, he snags her. And this kid was one of the better guards in the country, as a freshman. And she ain't skipped a beat. She can hoop. She can pull up, knock down the mid-range J, beat you from deep, kind of bait you off the dribble and get to the hoop. So she's a nice player, and she's making them go for sure. And then, flipping it back to the old panhandle again, Chipola's got to go on the road and play, number 3 Gulf Coast. And Gulf Coast is going to be a tough out, and I think when they play Northwest, that's going to be the game of the week, and they, of course, they got to play each other 3 times, everybody in that league.
Right. Yeah.
So that's going to be a bit of a tough game for both teams.
Absolutely.
But they'll that's what makes the Panhandle Conference in women's basketball so good, So they'll make a good game of it. That's what it's all about, So
Such is life. Yeah.
So among the many other games that I'm sure we could talk about, I targeted those 5 or 6.
Yeah.
So, we'll report back out next week and see how they all do,
Yeah. What's interesting about these games is should, the game that'll create the most movement, right, within our rankings is if McLennan can manage to get an upset.
Mm-hmm.
They'll create some movement. Gulf Coast takes care of business. They slide up. We got some people sliding down. So I'm really interested to see how the old ranking system will look.
So that
next
could
week.
put a number 1 versus number 2 in the Panhandle future game together.
That's
that
right.
will happen pretty soon because they start playing each other all the time. So yeah, that might be the pivotal game of the week.
Absolutely.
So, we'll see what happens there. But when we come back, we're going to talk with MJ Baker, the head women's coach at Eastern Florida State. We're excited to have her on. We'll be right back with NJCAA Hot Hoops after this.
As the second largest intercollegiate athletic association in the country, the NJCAA serves not only a pivotal role in college athletics, but in higher education. The NJCAA Foundation aims to move the association forward through resources, grant programs, and other special initiatives. Your gift to the NJCAA Foundation will make a difference and create opportunities.
On the hot seat today, MJ Baker, head coach at Eastern Florida State College. We're delighted to have you on, MJ, and we want to learn more about Eastern Florida State and how you have transformed this program from over the years that I have been doing JUCO women's basketball, perhaps one of the worst programs that I'd ever seen back when it was called Brevard, to now you're a national power. You're knocking on the door. Finished in the top 4 last year. You lost in the national semifinals. We're just happy to have you here, and we want to learn more about Eastern Florida State and your formula for success.
Yeah, man, I'm so excited to be on this platform. I'm just so stoked that NJCAA Women's Hoops has a platform like this and that you guys are even giving us the light to speak and to cover what we're doing. Yeah, we've come a long ways. This is my 7th year at Eastern, and honestly, it's truly the people. And I know people say that, but if it wasn't for the players and the staff, I've had my coach, Mark Dakotas, Coach Yoda, as my assistant coach the last 7 years, and then have had such wonderful players coming through the program who believe in the vision of making this a top program in the nation. And yeah, we lost a heartbreaker to Trinity Valley, last second shot by 1 last year in the semifinals. And we lost in overtime to Jones the year before in the Elite 8. So we're like so close we could taste it, but not there. We're kind of like that person that never really gets that homecoming invite, but we're right there.
I see you moved up in the rankings this past week from 21 to 18, correct?
Yeah, we were 3rd in the nation starting off. And then Maya had all 3 of my point guards, which we play very positionless basketball. And you can say positionless as all you want, but if you don't have point guards, you're done. And unfortunately, all 3 of my point guards, my starting point guard had a concussion, my backup had a fractured foot, and my 3rd string had a high ankle sprain, all in the same 2 weeks that we played Northwest Florida, Pensacola, and Gulf Coast. So that was a beautiful little growing situation for our team. So we lost those 3 games back to back. We lost the Pensacola in overtime. We lost the Gulf Coast by 14, and then Northwest Florida gave us a little beating, and then we got our point guards back, and then we beat Gulf Coast, which is their only loss right now. And since then, we've been rolling. Now, do we still have a lot of room to grow? Yes, 100%. But I learned a lot about scheduling, and I also learned a lot about how important a point guard is. Because I usually you might have 1 point guard maybe out, but to have all 3 out at the same time and trying to have shooting guards run point guard position is very interesting.
Yeah, Kenya, she's echoing what we've been talking about since day one.
She is.
Those backcourt players, those PGs, right?
Yeah, I mean, you've been watching our show, Coach, and so I'm all about the point guards. And like, I don't think I've ever heard that before, that all 3 point guards have been out at the same time. Wow. Well, listen, there's some good and some bad to that, right? I'm always the one that wants to find the good in all the situations. So I guess with that happening, your other players were able to step up, get some experience that they may not have gotten otherwise. And then now you guys run an 11-game winning streak. I mean, that's awesome. So talk to us a little bit just about how maybe you guys have turned the corner a little bit later, than some other people due to your injuries, and just, what have y'all learned through this winning streak?
Yeah, it's been really awesome. And I agree 100% with you. I've been coaching as a head coach for 17 years. And I've had a point guard injury, but I've never had all 3. Like, that's like I usually have 2 point guards in every team and then a combo guard. So the fact that like all 3 were out was like incredible. And I was like, wow, I didn't know I'd have to have 4 of them. But anyway, yeah, it taught us a lot. They grew a lot through that. And honestly, it humbled us because we have 11 new players this year. And that's kind of how junior college ball is. Not only do we replace 8 to 11 players every year, which has been amazing because we get to work with so many different players and help them, grow into the young women, empowered women, and get them ready for the next level. But it's also given us an opportunity to kind of recreate what we want to do each year. And you really don't know your team. I kind of describe recruiting like the box of like Russell box of chocolate, where you're like, oh, this is like a really cool, I got a little piece of everything recruiting. And then you're like, this looks really good. And then you bite into it and you're like, oh, that's orange. Was not expecting that, So recruiting's like that. And sometimes you see something that doesn't look great. You're like, I don't know, we'll take a chance on this. And then they become this unbelievable, player and this X factor you weren't even expecting. So I think early on too, we had to figure out who we are. And I think that's a situation that junior college coaches have to do every year, is figure out who we are and then placing them in the roles of like what they do best. Because by the time we do preseason and then 3 or 4 games in, you are who you are. Like your weaknesses are your weaknesses. We're not changing that because that's the summertime, right? So I think that's what helped us a lot too, is that we kind of were revealed really early our weaknesses and where we lacked, and then we're able to kind of patch up things and kind of put people in the roles to succeed, which I feel like is a lot of coaching period, is just adjusting and then figure out where your players can do their best.
Yeah, I love that. That I would definitely describe recruiting in general, but especially JUCO recruiting just like that. Like, we get to watch them a little bit, not a ton, right? Like I remember in D1 when I was recruiting, man, I got to watch kids more times than I wanted to, just because you got to be there, right? I'm like, I need to start watching this kid because I'm seeing a lot of holes that I don't know if I want, But then in JUCO, like we watch a lot of film. We just don't have the capacity to get there like the Division Ones do with like 6 people on their staff. So like talk to us when you were talking about like when you get a new box of chocolates, how do you take all these new players, and then how do you because I just believe in letting players do their thing, be themselves within your system. So how, like, what's the system that you guys have? Obviously, we know skill development is huge for you guys, and y'all do a great job with that. But just talk about like, what's your way to the world to your developing your teams?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of it is versatility. We try to recruit players who are very versatile and have some IQ to them, but also that are team players and not. And our thing is like, if one eats, we all eat. We're not trying to. I'm not an NBA style coach. Like, some coaches let their players throw up 25, 30 shots, and like that's how they run it, and that's not what we do. Like, we want 5 to 6 players in double figures. And we want everyone doing their part and being an impact, and not just surrounding everything around like 1 or 2 players. We do have a really dominant player this year, but she's still like the most humble player, Amelia Hassett. She's still like one of the most humble players we have. But I feel like when we're recruiting and just forming our team, I really don't have a system. I do have things that I like to do, and I try to run it every year or try to be better in it and find players who fit that. But as you know, we have to adjust, and like it's amazing how much each year I adjust or like trying to figure out something new, because what I think might work with this team doesn't work, even with defenses to offenses. So to me, the biggest thing is for them to get to know each other, and then self-awareness, like helping these young ladies discover who they are away from home. And because it's their first time away from home. So it's like, who am I without my parents around? Like, what do I stand for? Who am I in this world? So I think self-awareness is really big that we hit on. And then just them learning each other, because instead of just playing with each other, we really want to get to know each other. Like what makes each person tick? What's their why? What do they do what they do? And I feel like once they figure that out and they understand each other's stories, they start really playing for each other. And it's like a love that I don't think many teams have, because instead of just going, oh, she doesn't eat cheese and likes Drake, it's more like, oh man, her mom battled cancer and she comes from a family of 8, and like this is her way out. And so like when they start discovering the stories of each other and the why, they start playing with each other and for each other, I think that makes a huge difference for us.
Yes, I love that. So you guys, like we said earlier, you're on the 11-game winning streak. What's coming up for you guys? Just talk to us a little bit about your schedule over the next couple weeks, and what are some, without giving too much of your information, what are some things that you guys are looking to improve as you head into your, second round of conference play?
Yeah, so we are playing Indian River tomorrow. who we haven't played yet, and they're second in our conference. They only have one loss and we have none. So that's going to be a huge matchup. And us and Indian River always are going head to head each year. It's like one of us is sending the other one home, or like, so that's a big rivalry we have. They're only like an hour and a half down the road. So that's going to be a big game for us tomorrow. Luckily it's home. So that's a great thing that it's home. And then we're pretty much playing 5 games in the next 9 days. We've run the second round of conference. And that's another thing that I don't think a lot of people understand is how hard JUCO is. Not only do we play like every other day or every couple days, but to win states, we have to win 3 games in 3 days. To win nationals, you have to win 5 games in maybe 6 days or maybe 7 if you're lucky. So like, I don't think people really understand that not only do we work with some really high level athletes, but the grit and the grind it takes to even be there at the end. It's really hard with injuries and with everything else, and just keeping their bodies healthy. That's what we're trying to do right now. We're really focused on rest and recovery, and just like trying to sharpen our mind and really sharpen our efficiency on things, and just continue to keep confidence, because like it or not, I mean, women are a lot of feelers. So like what happened last game, even if they were like one of the best shooters in the state, it takes 2 bad games and their whole life is over.
Yeah.
So that confidence is huge for us this year. It's just keeping their confidence, keeping their bodies healthy, and then just trying to really sharpen the mind.
MJ, I am so with you when you're talking about like the grind. Like I remember recruiting JUCO, and I remember watching some super, super talented kids play. And, you know, when I was coaching with my husband, I would say, she's not tough enough. And he's like, are you kidding? She just put up 30. She's not tough enough for JUCO. And I mean, there's very subtle ways that you can see if a kid is tough enough in the recruiting process, because I mean, yes, we can make them a little tougher and we can get them around the edge, but like if they don't have the dog in them, you know, if they don't have that in them, that is a very, very hard thing to teach. So, you know, you're spot on with that for sure.
No, I agree. And that's hard to find, like you said. And you have to find players who want to bet on themselves and not just sit, no offense, but sit comfortably in a scholarship, right? Mm-hmm. Like a 4-year program, it's kind of comfortable. Like you can just go in there and sit, and you did it and it's over with. And a lot of these girls have scholarships, but they want more, and they want to see how good they can get, and they want to play. So I feel like that's why JUCO has kind of changed things, and it has transformed a lot. Like going D1 or going whatever level is not what it used to be. Like you're getting these grad transfers, and so you're coming as a freshman behind people that have been there 4 or 5 years of college. They're 21, 23 years old, and you're 18, you're best player on your team. You're the only player that could play on your team. So it's like, okay, it's a different level. So I think JUCO has just been such a, like you said, it's a gritty place, but I feel like it also does help produce that grind and grit. Now, do they have to have that coming in? Yes. But to a certain extent, I feel like it gives you another level of like preparation, just betting on yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Coach, this was an absolute honor having you on. I know you're moving and shaking today. And like we do it all. We just put all the different hats on, right? So thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be with Dan and I. We're so happy that we got to have you in the hot seat.
Thank you, Kenya, so much. And it wasn't that hot. It was actually pretty nice. I enjoy you guys.
Yeah,
Thank you for everything, for the game, and just know that like we really do appreciate you guys. So thank you for being the voice for us, for being the face for us, and actually giving us a voice and face. So thank you.
Intensity fuels these champion student athletes to greatness. Zurich Insurance is proud to be the official provider of student athlete insurance for the National Junior College Athletic Association. Throughout the highs, we cheer along to their screams of victory. Throughout the lows, we support them through their tears of defeat. Zurich Insurance, helping student athletes play the sport they love.
Okay, we're back at NJCAA Hot Hoops with Kenya and Dan Olson. Let's talk some final thoughts, closing thoughts for the week, and we'll talk about a couple of players. And but we always have our mailbag. So what do you got, Kenya?
Yes. Hey, first of all, I want to thank our listeners for contributing to the mailbag and really giving us some good questions and having good interaction with our listeners. So it's a good time for us for sure.
Agreed.
So the first question that we had this week was about the national tournament, and this listener wanted to know: has the attendance at the women's national tournament decreased since moving to Casper, Wyoming, and how long do we expect for it to stay in Casper, Wyoming?
Okay, that's a good question because I
That's
don't
a
have that
great
answer.
question.
Yeah. Obviously, there's a bidding process that goes
Mhm.
into this whole thing to determine. I'm sure there's finances that go into this, but let's reflect back. I mean, back when it was at Tyler, you know, well attended, great atmosphere, good location. And then we moved to Salina.
Yeah,
And everybody was saying, what the heck are we doing going to Salina? Right.
yeah.
But it had its own little bit of tradition that was being developed and funness to be in Salina. Even though all
And
the
Salina
restaurants
was close
closed
to
at
the
9.
men's, and it was close to the men's national
Yeah.
tournament, but that was a plus.
Yeah. I mean, it was an hour and change from Hutch,
Mhm.
and then, we moved to Lubbock, and everybody was starting to scratch their head like, what are we doing going to Lubbock, and Lubbock, nice facility at Lubbock,
Mhm.
and I enjoyed going to Lubbock, but obviously it's easy for some and not so easy for others. So here we are, we're going to Casper, and we're going to hope and pray that weather is going to hold up for everybody to get there and to leave afterwards. And, I mean, I've never been to Casper, so I'm kind of actually looking forward to it,
All
so
right.
yeah. And,
Do you know when the next bid for when their terms are up? Do you have any idea?
gosh, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either.
That's a
I
good
have to look
question.
that
I don't
up.
know how the longevity process works, but I mean, look, how many years were we in Salina?
Forever.
Quite a while, and then,
Long
in Lubbock, that was at least 5, I think.
time.
So, I'm sure it probably runs in that type of a cycle,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Anyway,
Yeah. All right. So, Mr. Dan the Man,
yes.
this is for you.
Okay.
Like you're probably the only one that can answer this question that I would go, I believe him. Okay. So, you ready?
Yeah, I'm
All
ready.
right. Name the top 5 point guards and the top 5 big men in women's NJCAA. Now, I do not want big men that are running around dribbling on the fat. I'm talking traditional bigs.
Okay. The
Okay.
traditional low post.
Traditional bigs. Yes. So top 5 point guards, top 5 bigs.
Okay. The top center, Izzy Mamadou at Gulf Coast.
Yep.
We've talked about her today. We've talked about her in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Left-handed, mobile, can score in the block, can
Mm-hmm.
obviously rebound and run. And that's what everybody wants.
Mm-hmm.
She's
All
one
right.
of the 5.
For sure.
Go out to
She's
South
the
Plains.
one. She's the one.
Yes.
Okay.
No disputing that. Jennifer Silva at South Plains. 6'4", got a college ready body, can
Mhm.
run the floor when she wants to. But pretty skilled. She's one of the more coveted post players, I would suspect, in the country as well.
Yeah.
Here's an unknown down at South Georgia Tech, Mava Fatsa. Now, Mava was there as a player last year, but she didn't play. Canadian born, 6'2", 6'3", but she's putting up some pretty good numbers at South Georgia Tech. And I know she's getting her fair share of recruitment too, as well.
Mhm.
Um, there's a big kid that we talked about last week shortly with Eastern Arizona and Gracie Sorensen. I think Gracie's one of the better true fives,
Yeah.
because she's able to score with either hand around the basket and can get up and down the floor fairly well, So I would put her in that category. We don't have a huge amount of depth in this position, but I hunt them, I find them.
Yeah.
Alicia Spann. Alicia Spann had committed early on to Old Dominion
Mm-hmm.
and has since that's been rescinded. So she's at
Oh.
Daytona State. She's about 6'2", was a transfer from Chipola. Kind of reinvented herself a little bit from a physical standpoint, got in better shape. And she's got, I'm sure, a fair amount of interest as well. And so I would put those five as probably my best five so far in that position.
Yeah. When we got that question, my mind started to really like churn and think, right? So how hard is it? I mean, let's think about traditional bigs. Let's think about how many just traditional back to the basket, turning, squaring up, making post moves. I mean, it's almost like they're becoming obsolete
Oh
in a
yeah.
bit, and in a way.
Yeah. It's exactly what we have mentioned since our first show of the guards game being the game of now and the future. You implement the forward center as almost like a big guard.
Yeah.
You want to face them up. You want to stretch them out. That's So I mean, you used to play two big post players down on the block, either side. I mean, that's what I used to do. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and that ain't happening anymore. Or if
Mm-mm.
it does, it's rare.
Very rare.
You know?
Yeah.
But it's guards game is where it's at, and I can tell
Yep.
you some 5 guards now that can hoop. Okay,
Let me see.
we've
They
talked
better
about
not turn. They better not be turning the ball over. So
not
go.
13 times, but yeah, exactly.
Oh, that poor girl.
Yeah. Destiny McFall. This is why Northwest Florida State is at the top of the heap and has been. Destiny's got size. She's 5'9". She's a lefty. She can knock down jump shots. She can manufacture shots. That's what she can do. But she's a distributor. She can make things happen for the other people on the floor,
Mm-hmm.
So probably the best thing that could have happened to Destiny was her landing at Northwest Florida State or going the JUCO route. Why? Because she's got quality minutes, quality competition on a national level, in a large spotlight.
And quality practicing.
There you go.
Quality practicing. Yeah.
And you get all of those quality things, there's going to be a quality end result.
Yep.
So Victoria Santana, we spoke about last week, excuse me,
Mm-hmm.
from Eastern Florida, Eastern Arizona.
Yep.
Knockdown jumper, streaky, shifty, but smart the way she plays,
Mm-hmm.
and she's one of their leaders. That's why they're doing as well as they're doing. I think she's got a vital role in that. And we just spoke about Heaven Samoya Mathis from Salt Lake. And like I said, we had talked a lot about her, but this is a vital piece to their success at Salt Lake. And you can't leave her alone.
Mm-hmm.
And she's just got that quickness and explosiveness to, involve others when she gets into the lane and knowing what to do with it,
Yep.
Now Gulf Coast being where they are, Gulf Coast has got, Izzy, of course, but
Right.
Izzy wouldn't be getting some of what she's getting on the offensive end if it wasn't for Aaliyah Bartholomew.
No question.
A really good backcourt player that's a capable scorer, but she's a little speed merchant now. Tough to keep in front of her as she's going up the floor. One of the best, I think, in my opinion. And Sine Bevely, at McLennan.
Yeah.
Sine is a jump shooter. She's got a 3-point game. She kind of got a shiftiness about her, and she's a great anticipator, I think, on the defensive end. She's got like that way of disrupting people and slipping through passing lanes and stealing a thing and laying it in, you know? So I would say that those 5 right there are probably leading the pack right now. So
Okay, I agree with that.
thanks. I'm
agree.
glad you would. Yeah.
Right as usual.
Yeah.
Dan the man.
There you go. What else we got?
That's it.
That's
Only
it?
2 this week. Only 2 this week. Yeah.
Well, there's not
So
wrong.
what do we got? What do we got just for our final words for today? Closing thoughts. What you got, Dan?
Well, you know, like from when we began the show, I think that, you know, you're in the middle month of January and you're in a grind situation of, you know, probably dealing with a little bit of nagging injury, maybe. Even though you've just come back, you know, it's kind of like you have to reset yourself, but you really have to focus and value these conference games because these are the ones that really count. You know, those non-conference games in the early part had nothing really to do with the overall aspect of you win your league and that puts you in a placement position, your regional tournament, you know? And I think that those schools that are, you know, really focusing on that part of their conference schedule and taking it one by one, that's huge.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. I agree.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing else. Let's sign it off for the day, and we'll catch it next week. You know, so thanks everybody for tuning in to NJCAA Hot Hoops, and we'll be back next week with another jam-packed version of information, all things junior college women's basketball. Thanks again for staying with us today, and enjoy the week ahead.